Hi everybody, I'm Joey. Well, in this video I'll be making this cedar bath, and by the time you're finished watching it will have its final coat of spray on the outside. It's going next door to my neighbour who's a panel beater, who's going to do the final gloss coat on the outside. And so I hope you enjoy. I should point out at this point that when I started this I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. So I had no plan, or really I just had an image in my head of what I was trying to create and I went for it. So if I ever did this again, there's definitely a couple of things I would do differently, but it's going to work, and hope you enjoy the video. So I needed to first work out how big to make the bath, so this seemed like a logical choice. So I made this little mock-up of kind of the angles I was choosing for the backrest of the bath and the sides. So I chose 15 degrees for the sides and the foot end, and the backrest is 35 degrees. So I started by making the base of the bath. By the way, this is all cedar, and I was gluing it together with this international epoxy. It's a bit like the West system, and this is what I used also throughout the video, gluing the segmented pieces together. Once that was cured, we threw the panel on the CNC and surfaced it on both sides. We could start cutting the actual shape of the bath. Most importantly, the reason I wanted to use the CNC was to form the fall towards the plug in the bath, which I thought and worked out to work really well, and I don't know that I would have been able to do it at all that nicely by hand. And then we could cut out the plug hole. And of course the dominoes were exposed, so my planning wasn't quite as good as it should have been there, but there's no going back at this point. So I needed to cover the base with, I'm just using clear packing tape, and that protected the base from all the epoxy that is about to be poured on while I'm gluing up the sides of the bath. Now I put these kind of forms up to give me a guide for tough to work to when I was putting the segments together, but pretty much immediately they came off because they were just in the way. I ripped a bunch of planks at 15 degrees, so when they stacked up they would kind of form a regular 15-degree angled wall. And then I could cut them to length on some random angle that I decided to try. I ended up not even using a stop, but most of the cuts I was doing by eye. This first ring I did actually do by maths. I worked out what the angle should be, but as the radius slowly increases as the bath sides are built up, that angle becomes kind of blurred because it's so minutely changing. I found it was easier just to wing it really and cut each piece to fit.
A bath.
It is a bath. Tie Dad, so I can film this bit. You look in the camera. There's my neck, but.
So this doesn't set very quickly.
No, you got about 2 hours. What do you hear? Yeah. So this piece going in is 35 degrees, and then as the curve comes around to the sides of the bath, the pieces are stepped in 5-degree increments. So it goes from 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 degrees, which builds the scallop-shaped back. And I needed to try and flatten out each layer after it was glued up, but I actually found later on just using a plank with sandpaper attached to it was a much easier way to get the job done. And I tried weighting down the pieces as I was gluing them together, but that just really didn't seem to work very well either, so it was all just put in place by pressure, and they kind of suction together a little bit. And this just kind of went on and on. I would do a layer a day, pretty much. So this is the last layer, which is the top of the backrest, and I've actually changed from 35 degrees back to 15 degrees, and it just made a nice little kind of curve in at the top, which I think looked quite nice. It's just, I think I've got 20 or 30 grit on the grinder, and it makes pretty short work of the cedar. It's just a bit bloody dusty. Working on the inside was really not as easy as working on the outside. The flat sides were not so bad, but the air curves on the end were really hard to do with this tool. I am not aware, or certainly not sure what other tool I could have used. I'm sure there's probably something out there, but I don't know about it. So I discovered this little kind of flapper wheel sander. It's 80 grit, which I thought would be really good, but it turned out to be completely useless. So I pretty much did the whole lot with the orbital sander. So this is the product I'll be using to seal the bath. It's a 2-pot epoxy and it's very thin. It's designed to soak into timber and then set. And I'm just using multiple layers of this, which has a gloss finish. Not that it's actually designed as a finish, I suppose it is, but it's made for the marine industry where then you can then paint over it. So I needed to get the bottom done so then I could work on the rest of it. So I needed to do the bottom and the outside first, and it looked pretty cool. And I ran out of chip brushes here, so I had to use a rag for this coat. So some of the intersections of blocks had little voids, and I thought I would try and be smart and fill them with epoxy. And to try and speed things up, I waited till the epoxy was right on the verge of setting, and then I would quickly put it in all the gaps, which filled the gaps but left a horrible mess everywhere, which I thought, oh, just sand it off. Well, it didn't sand off very easily. The problem being that cedar is so soft and the epoxy is so hard, I ended up sanding too much cedar away and not enough epoxy, and don't have a perfectly smooth finish around the curves, which is annoying. But I got there eventually. So after a good sanding, I just went back and filled up any little cracks, very fine hairline cracks or voids between some of the joins, and then I just used masking tape or packing tape to kind of keep the epoxy at the surface. The epoxy sucks to the tape and just stays at the surface of the crack or void, and then I take it off after and sand it. And I needed to get the backrest part on a decent angle so the epoxy wouldn't run everywhere, hence the reason it's being tied up to the roof. And then it was just multiple coats of the Everjaw, probably 5 or 6 coats of this, with some sanding between. And I brought out the big guns to really test it. And only one leak, which I thought was pretty good. Very small, tiny pinprick of a hole somewhere. Can you pull out the plug for Dad?
Can you reach?
No, me.
You want me to do it?
Dad, do it.
So there was nothing obvious where the leak was, so I just kind of scraped away anything that looked a little suspicious, and then mixed up some epoxy and kind of smushed it in as best I could. Then I wet sanded the whole thing with 600 grit. The outside I'm going to get my neighbour who's a panel beater to spray paint it with a gloss, and the inside I'm just going to leave with the epoxy finish, because my panel beater was saying that it's probably better not to have the spray in the water situation, it could break down, so that's fine. So I just gave the inside one final coat of Everjaw epoxy, and it's not a perfect finish, but it's good enough. So there it is, all finished. Look, if I ever had to do this again, I would use a much harder timber. Walnut would be pretty nice, I think, or ash even. Just so something that is a similar hardness to the epoxy when you're sanding. That's the main problem I came across. Also, I would be a lot more careful with how I use the epoxy, especially for filling holes and things. I think that's a good option, but I need to be more careful about how I do it. Otherwise, I'm really happy with how it turned out, and all I have to do now is build a house to put it in. And that will be happening pretty shortly. So see you later.